right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Monday. I'd like to call this meeting of the West Allis West Milwaukee School District to order, please. We could please rise for the pledge. And Ms. Klug, would you be able to lead us, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States
of America,
and to the
to the
republic
republic for which it stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. All right, Suzette, can we do the roll, please?
Yep. Mr. Sikich.
Present.
Mr. Schultz.
Here.
Mr. Lee.
Here.
I'm trying to find mine. Mr. Eustruck.
Here.
Ms. Klug.
Here.
Mrs. Kaiser.
Here.
Mr. Keller.
Here.
Mrs. Justin. She should be joining, so hopefully soon. And President Emmons.
Here. Proper notice of this meeting has been posted in accordance with the open meeting laws of the state of Wisconsin. Do we have any additions or modifications to tonight's agenda?
I have no changes this evening.
Great. All right, we will go on to item 6 this evening, then our public comments. Are there any members of our gallery this evening who would wish to address the board in public comments? Okay. Seeing none, we will then move on to item 7, the superintendent's report. Dr. Lexman.
Oh, great, thank you. We'll start with 7.1, which is our returning to school update. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I'll jump over to that. Okay, and so this is our update for the school board meeting on October 12th. And similar to the last time, we'll start just a little bit of what I'll cover in the agenda here with 7.1. And there's kind of 3 big chunks here. And so we'll stop kind of after each one. So some of it is around the metrics. Then the next big chunk is the employee and parent quick check survey results that we want to share with the board and talk about our next steps related to that. And Deidre is going to join me in working through that. And that's actually a presentation linked inside of this presentation. So hopefully it all works. Our method of instruction survey results is another big piece that we think is kind of interesting. So it's the phone calls that we made. And then the numbers, and we just wanted the board to be aware of the numbers of families kind of in each group, meaning virtual, distance, the 2-day a week, and then eventually in person. And then where we are with our distance learning preparation and next steps, just like the last few meetings. So with our health metrics, things continue to not go in the direction that we're hoping for. We're updating this now, and again, we're including the percent positive as metrics 3 and 4. I mean, if there is any good news here, it's that the percent positive in West Allis, West Milwaukee has leveled off, at least, from 2 weeks ago to this past week. And hopefully that's—
Dr. Lexman, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but as we talked about, those numbers are flipped.
Darn it, that's right. You're correct. So let me back up here. I updated that in the health metric link to the website, but not on the presentation. So my apology for that. Good, Noah, thank you for catching that. So Milwaukee County has leveled off. West Allis, West Milwaukee's gone in the wrong direction. So the percent positive, the 8.8, that really belongs with West Allis, West Milwaukee, and the 7.3 belongs with Milwaukee County. So again, I apologize, but good catch, Noah. And the COVID burden status continues to increase. But we are, and I'll touch on this a little bit further, starting to look at, how else we might interpret the metrics that'll tell us when it's time for us to go move to phase 2. And even though we don't have that fully worked through yet with the health department, we think there may be some opportunity in looking more carefully at the West Allis, West Milwaukee data points in particular. The other piece of information that we're going to start adding to our website, and this is the first time that this is our school nurses collecting this. And so we're going to start reporting, like almost all school districts are now, the active cases, so the positive tests among students and staff, then close contact, and then the numbers in low risk. So just being monitored. They've been told that they may have had an exposure and they should monitor. And right now, or given the size of our district, and when you look at other districts in our area, our numbers are quite low. But again, we're not in school, we're virtual. So, and this is at the end of last week. So it's going to be the count kind of at the end of each week. So we had 3 staff working through a positive test, and one staff member was in a leadership meeting with us last week and doing fine, but not asymptomatic. We have 10 staff that are quarantined right now, and then 2 that are considered low risk, but we're told to monitor. And then for students, it's 1 at the end of last week active, and close contact 8. And so again, we'll be updating this every week as well. So that's where we are with the metrics right now. So any board members have questions about the metrics? Okay, no, I see your hand. Stephanie, I don't have everybody on my screen, so if there's somebody else, if you would help, that'd be great.
I don't either. Everyone's in the little grid mode. I don't have the full grid open with the presentation.
Jeff,
So I can't
Jeff raised his hand first, so if Jeff wants to go first.
Just real quick, of the staff that are quarantined, were they working from home or working from the building?
It's a good question. I don't know that. I would have to find that out. So it's a good question, and I'll get back to you on it.
Thank you.
Dr. Luxon, my question was just regarding this internal metrics. Is that including the camps that we're running right now?
Yes, it would. Yes. So, and I should note here, there may be other staff or students that have folks in their house that are quarantined, or folks in their house that have been told that they have to monitor through other connections, right, that we wouldn't be aware of. So these are the ones that we're aware of through our work with our nurses and our health department.
Thank you.
So with that, we'll jump over to the survey results, and this is going to take us to a different presentation. So hopefully this works out. So this is our the 30-day pulse check survey, and really the intent is, again, we've been focusing through our strategic plan on continuous improvement. And so this connects into that work. And even though it's really focused right now with the student partner districts around how things are going in the kind of different year we're having, we think it's important that we conduct some surveys, get some feedback, and design some action steps for improvement. So the goals that this connects to are really employee engagement and culture. So that one of the high-level goals in our strategic plan is really that employees are engaged, they're active, and that we're communicating effectively. And in communication and community relations, this is really the connection to the learners and families are really working together to achieve our shared vision, and they're really proud to be a part of the organization. And so these surveys really tie into those 2 goals in the strategic plan. So when we talk about a pulse check, this is intended to be short, targeted, high-impact surveys just to provide a status check for improvement. And we're doing this at 30 days and 90 days. Previously, I said 30, 60, 90, and that's different. That's a check-in we do with new employees. The survey that student partners are using is 30 days and 90 days. So we have about 2 months now to really work on some action steps to try to improve in some of the areas where we're not doing as well as we might like, although overall we're doing pretty well in this survey. But there's always room to grow and improve. So in terms of who we heard from, we had a really good response. So parents of almost 3,000 parents. So we're getting close to 50% response rate among parents. And that's really strong in a survey. Employees, it's almost 100% in response rate. So we're just over 1,000 employees if we include everybody, such as recreation employees, that there are many, but they work intermittently and not a lot of hours, but there's a lot of people. And so the response rate was really quite good. And so the point of this all is, right, so if we ask, then we have to act. And so this is really intended to be kind of a rapid response to results. And what I want to do is just, what are the steps of this? And then we'll talk a little bit about what are the highlights, things we can celebrate, and what are the things we're going to focus on for improvement. So that's the process here is just really administering the survey, right? So turnaround results really fast, which has happened. We have gathered with leaders, Melissa Matarazzo on our leadership team for our district, worked through this. We worked through this presentation already with all building leaders and schools also then are starting to drill into a little bit of what they can do in terms of action steps. And tonight and ongoing, we'll recognize bright spots. We've prioritized our hot spots. We have action steps in mind and we'll begin implementing those. And then we're going to monitor, at 60 days, how are they doing? And then survey again at the 90-day point. So in terms of celebrating, a couple things that are on the slide here I'll touch on, but before that, what Melissa shared with us when she walked us through this is it's not only the scored items, but there's also kind of the open response. So they're just in comments. And there are two kind of things that she said really stood out that seem to be different than some of their other partner districts. And we think it's interesting and we feel good about it. That in terms of the parent feedback, that it's pretty clear in the comments that parents understand that learning now compared to what we were doing virtually in the spring is quite different. And we did that's a lot of work in Deidre's team. It was very intentional that what we designed was going to be more rigorous, more engaging for students. And we believe based on the feedback from parents, we've achieved that. And we think that's a good thing. We know we've worked through some concerns for some students for whom it maybe is too much. And like we do in any year, we build plans that really meet the needs of individual students, and we continue to do that. The other thing on the staff side that came through that Melissa shared from the comments was the sense of gratitude and how we're working through this. And that's her word, and we haven't seen the comments, but she said it's different than what she's reading from other districts. And she said she reads a lot of the survey results, but this overriding sense of appreciation and gratitude. And we think that's something we can be proud of as we go forward. The other ones, in terms of the scored items, that parents have good access to the child's teacher and that we're keeping kids safe, and that staff feel confident that we're creating a safe learning and working environment, and in our capacity to overcome the challenges. And so that will serve us well as we continue to move through our phases. In terms of improving, parents have lower confidence that their children will not fall behind this year, right? So that's one of the big ones. And that's not a surprise to us because this is such a different experience of schooling for so many parents that we don't have experience built into parents and even for us yet about how do we do really good progress monitoring and how do we know if what we're doing is working because we're in such a different environment. And there's ways for us to do that. But we think it's important to pay attention to it. And so some of what came through under that item is the challenge of supporting learning at home, especially multiple students, quiet spaces, distractions. And in my Sunday thoughts, I shared that I had the grandkids that are in grades 3 and 4 with me on Friday. Well, they went to school virtually. And it was a learning experience for me. And I'm trying to, do my job. And they're in different parts of the house and they need support and they have separate schedules of when they have to log in and log out and what work they're supposed to be doing in between. And I was like, it was a good experience for me to really respect and appreciate parents that are working from home and have kids learning from home. And especially for our teachers that are teaching from home and have their own kids learning at home. So I understand that challenge, and I only did it for a day. And so true appreciation and respect for everybody that's supporting learners as we're in the virtual environment. Some of the reflections from parents, technology issues with Google Classroom and Schoology. There's some identification of lack of response from technical support. The lack of opportunity for interactions with peers. And then progress notes would be helpful. And that goes back to, is my child keeping up? Is this working? So some of this we think is communication related because we have, and again, it's Brandon Kelly and Deidre's team. They've produced all kinds of short videos to help with Google Classroom. Adam Hengel has done it as well, and Schoology. But it may be that we just haven't put them in the places where parents can easily find them. So there's a lot of support that we've built, but it may just be in the way we've organized information. And the same we think is true for technical support, because we've gotten a lot of really positive feedback, but it may be that we've, the access to where do I find the information I need may not be organized in a way that is most helpful for parents. So that some of this is the communication piece. And then the opportunities for interactions with peers is this is, I think, part of the reality of the environment, in the sense that, you know, teachers are trying to make sure they keep up with lessons and they keep up with the content. And there's less of the informal things that happen in classrooms. And so those kind of informal interactions that happen in hallways, that happen in cafeterias, that happen, you know, when you're going out to the bus, all of those kinds of things don't occur right now. So trying to figure out how we work those things in. And then Deidre, before I go on, if there's anything you want to add there on the parent side for us of how we're thinking about this piece of feedback.
Yeah, thanks, Marty. The pieces of feedback as far as how is my child doing in progress is something that we've really been paying a lot of attention to. And trying to find ways to do parent-teacher conferences now in the next couple of weeks and have that really be a reflective process where we just spend some time during the day and in the evening and on whenever it works for the family to do some more check-ins. So trying to connect more regularly and a little bit more of an advisory model, especially at our elementaries, similar to how we do at the high schools, where there's one teacher that sees that smaller group of kids, and we have more staff connecting to more students and more families. And some of those open office hours that we have for secondary, trying to build those opportunities in for elementary, just so families have the chance to connect more regularly, ask about how their child is doing and how progress is coming along in classrooms. And then we just had committee right before this for our building block, and we talked a lot around this year without, we're not asking families to do MAPS testing at home. It's hard enough to do it in schools, but it means that there's a data piece that we don't have. So we've been working really hard with each school to try to say, what evidence are you then collecting that assures parents that students are making progress in reading and in math and in science and social studies and other areas that we can share back with parents? And how do we look at really mastering content, which is still really important to us, with different evidence collection than test scores and normative data that we might normally have at this time of year. So each school is working on a plan for that. And then just something on the interaction with peers. We have lots of clubs and activities that have adapted to be virtual, and trying to make those more informal connections with kids and trying to make those opportunities. A couple of the elementary schools on those Wednesdays, in an effort to give a little bit of planning time to teachers as well as keep kids engaged and active in school, are doing high interest clubs in the middle of the day over recess. Very similar things to what we have been doing for the last few years when we've been in person, but we're figuring out how to adapt a lot of that to be virtual so that at minimum the students have just more, like Marty said, those informal opportunities to connect with their peers around something they might find interesting. As well as continuing all of our work around project-based learning. So we're bringing those kids' interests into the classroom and trying to figure out the navigation of all the breakout rooms just to give kids more time to interact with one another around school and around the things that they're doing at school, as well as who they are as people and what they're interested in. So each teacher is kind of working on a different format, or in each school, a different format for doing that, but yet reopening some of those opportunities, even though they look really different this year.
Thanks. And then on the employee side, some feedback that they're feeling they have little input on how the system will overcome pandemic challenges. And in some ways, that's, I think, a fair reflection. Given kind of what we were trying to figure out at a time when most employees aren't working during the summer. But we did have a good number of teachers and leaders on the big returning to school committee. So there was a lot of employee input. It just may be that it's different than what we're used to doing when we have, everybody in buildings and there's regular staff meetings, and there's just way more interaction around kind of next steps that employees get to participate in. But we are going to take some steps, and even inside of maintenance and custodial services, to do small team meetings to support, that group of our employees that we're really leaning on heavily when we hit distance learning in particular. A little bit of feedback around the flexibility, variability with schedules and Wednesday's prep time. And Deidre just mentioned some of that and how clubs in elementaries help free up teachers for a little more prep time. And we've asked principals for every elementary teacher to work in 2 additional hours per week of planning time. And that's in addition to the 3 full days that are already built in for elementaries. And again, none of the PD days are going to be used for the district level professional development, just because we're in such a kind of unique situation that all of that is planning work time for teachers. So the next one, there's also really a communication piece to respond to. So the consistent enforcement of cleaning safety protocols in school. And so some of that is just that we, again, going back to meeting with facilities to make sure we're all on the same page and being consistent, but also communicating that well to staff. That here's what happens when and by whom, and so we've talked about maybe there's a short video we make that demonstrates some of this. I mean, we've talked about Clorox machines and ozone machines and some of those things, but what are those and can we see them working? And we think something like that probably helps people understand that we're ready to go when we have students back in schools. And then again, updates on the progress of virtual learning. So it's similar to parents, how is this going? Is this working? And so as schools kind of work on how we're going to give progress to parents, we think that that's a way to kind of then sum that information back to staff. And then, and then again, kind of what's coming in the next phase for virtual teaching. And in particular, one of the harder problems to solve is for teachers that are going to, at some point here in the future, hopefully, we'll have in-person students, in two-day-a-week cohorts, but they'll also have virtual students. And so that gets to be one of the things that schools in particular, and more so secondary, are spending a great deal of their problem solving time on right now. There are solutions to it. And again, it's just, some of it is just, it's an unknown and it's something we've never done before. And so problem solve it as well as you can, but there's a point at which we have to get into it to build the skills among teachers to do the work that way versus what we're doing now or what we're used to doing in the past. So in terms of next steps, we've hit on a bunch of these already. A bunch of it is communicating, reviewing, organizing our online resources, emphasizing the importance of both rigorous instruction and social activities in virtual classes. So some of that is simply, giving teachers permission to engage in informal conversation with the kids, right? So this sense of we only have them for the short time and we've got to get through everything, but there's value in the socialization activities as well. And then we will, as we start, again, hopefully leaning towards the phase 2, so distance learning, then we'll start up again for a series of weeks, the Friday superintendent update, so that the letter with the short video, just to kind of ramp up communication efforts again. And then on the employee side, again, the balance of firm expectations, but flexibility to get the work done. So that, we want to be clear about what the expectations are. And we think we have been. We've been very clear, I think. And I've shared kind of the way we've communicated our expectations about what teachers are doing, what students are doing with other districts. And it's been a helpful tool, but we also want to make sure we message flexibility. And then supporting principals to integrate the input they're getting into their plans. So it's not a one size fits all in every building. There's things like, we always talk about this, things we hold in common, but then we have to trust professionals in our schools to solve the problems that differ from school to school. And then again, just like I said, previewing the safety planning and protocols. And just again, it's a communication challenge. So that's where we are at this point. What we want to do now is with board members, if there are questions on what we just shared here about this continuous improvement effort, but really focused right now on our virtual learning and then leaning into distance learning. So questions?
So I just want to, so for the technology issues with Google Classroom and Schoology, did the classroom catch any or capture any specific issues in detail?
No, and with the quick pulse survey, and Melissa didn't identify anything really targeted in the comments. So Deidre, I don't know if you remember anything else.
No, it wasn't anything super specific. And that's where, again, we attempted to put together as many videos and tips and tools. And we've had some tutoring sessions, and I held an evening session where parents could log in, and we just shared screen and we showed them exactly how to get in and what to do with it. So we didn't get anything more specific than that. The one thing I forgot to mention before is that when Brendan and I were talking about it, he also mentioned putting just a button on there that says, if you need a tutorial on something, we'll happily make one. Like if there's something that we use that you don't quite understand, so that parents can ask and request for specific help on something or a tutorial on something that maybe we think we've provided, like how to log in and how to get into something, but maybe there's a feature of it that they don't totally understand. One of the things that we thought might be some of the issue is we did have some teachers where they were struggling to get Google Classroom and Schoology to speak to one another. So that was something that came up when I had that parent night. So that was helpful feedback for me to get for some families, is that a few teachers were struggling with that. And then I could go back and follow up with those teachers. So we're trying as best we can to gather some more of those specifics, because we don't want families to feel frustrated. We've been watching outages and things like that. Google Classroom was out, was, I don't know, down, we call it, for a morning one day for a little while. And Schoology had a couple of intermittent outages, but very quickly resolved. So I went back and looked at that as well, Gary, to think, oh, maybe there was a problem where it was offline and families couldn't get at it, but that really didn't seem to be, certainly that's happening, right? Occasionally here and there, but the fixes have been very, very quick. I mean, we were able to get back up with things very, very quickly. So we didn't really get many more specifics than that, but we're trying to put out some more avenues to collect that information so that we can make sure if families are having specific concerns, we can address them.
Okay, thank you for that. I just thought of one more question related to that. Do we on a regular basis communicate to parents that if they have questions regarding Google Classroom or Schoology, that there is a resource for them to ask these kind of support?
Yes, it's been ongoing, that's for sure, through teachers, through principals. But again, some of this, even pivoting back to the Friday updates, is a little bit of an action step that seemed to get people's attention. We got good kind of response rates to that. So we thought maybe pivoting back to that, and then including, especially if now there's going to be a more obvious button of, I need help with this particular part of it, then we can create a tool that would help not only that parent, but every parent that might have that particular interest.
And just while we're on that topic, one person that I also want to make sure we recognize is Bruce Heisler from our technology department, because he has been amazing at being very quick to respond to things. It was surprising to us that we had some parents saying that they were struggling to get a response, because our response rate has been pretty quick. So that's where we're trying to investigate a little bit more on if they're hitting a tech issue, like where is the hole in kind of what we think we're doing. Because the ones that we get directly, we've been quick to respond to, but Bruce has been hugely helpful in making those videos and problem solving through things like getting closed caption for our students who are deaf and hard of hearing going. And he's been hugely helpful in all of that. So I just want to make sure we recognize him as well.
Okay, and thank you for that. It's a good summary. For the lack of technical support, again, any detailed information on that? Is that lack of technical support related to, maybe things the district's doing? Is it ISP related?
Yeah,
platform related?
Yeah, this survey is not designed to capture that kind of information. We may get a little bit.
Yeah, because that's.
Yeah. Go ahead, Gary.
Oh no, okay. Yeah, I understand the survey is a quick, but lack of technical support is so broad. It would be nice to know what that entails exactly.
Yeah,
and where specifically parents feel that their lack is.
Yeah, in 90 days, the survey will ask parents to identify their schools. And so it may allow us to localize a little bit of, so if that still kind of pops up as, lack of technical support, maybe it's more localized to a specific school. That maybe then we can have a different response, but we just don't have that information with this administration of the survey.
Okay, thank you.
One thing we did shift as well is we switched where we had the information for the innovation coaches at each school available on that website as well, just because that's a person who's really good with those technical issues. And we wanted to be sure that that was the point of contact, that families knew they could reach out to them. And those staff have been amazing about reaching out to say, hey, we're here to help with some of those tech issues if you're having them. But so those are two things at least we attempted to adjust, and hoping that we could get more information on where are some of those technical issues happening so that we can help solve them.
No.
Yeah, I just wanted to inquire. We keep saying that we're ready. We're ready to move phases and things are in place. And there was that comment question from a parent or grandparents a few weeks back regarding getting pictures of what classrooms look like out there. And I was just wondering if we were working on that at all. And I didn't know how difficult it would be if each teacher took their own picture, that they could post on their classroom something or other that people could see. So when it was time to go back, those sorts of questions or concerns about how things are going to be might be ameliorated by having that.
Yeah, no, that's a good idea. And I like the idea, actually. We've done a little bit of like a generic space, but I think you're right. It probably is more meaningful for parents. Like, I want to see my child's room that they're going to. So I like that idea. I think we can ask teachers to do that when we start communicating. We're moving into phase 2, that could be one of the steps. Okay, and so the last couple of things that, Studer provides is, it's not just this survey. They do our focus work to keep us kind of drawn to the strategic plan, but they also offer a roundtable leadership support session. So this has been ongoing since early August and continues. And so just so the board and public kind of sees the relationship, and even though it is also different this year than what the relationship is like in the past. It is a lot of support for us. And then we also have, the conferences and events. So What's Right in Education is their national conference. It's going to be all virtual this year, but we have presented our work in the past at these conferences, and we get really kind of interesting and good feedback about the work we're doing. And so this presentation will be linked into all of the board materials. And so if you want to see more detailed results from the parents and the employee surveys, they're linked here, but we didn't have anything that was in the ones for sure, and almost everything was high 3s and into the 4s. So that's why it is a focus on improvement, but overall what Melissa shared with us is that we're doing as well as others and maybe better. So we think that's kind of one of the big takeaways on this. So I have to move all of you to get back. So that was the survey results. And so the third section of the presentation update is really on method of instruction. And I think Erin Norris is with us, and Beth will help me with these slides. But again, where we started off, right, we started with Google surveys to get feedback around parent selections, and this was early on. And again, we recognized maybe we didn't explain it as clearly as possible. But when we looked at going back to the first responses, we had about 19% or 635 of the out of the responses, right, were all virtual. And if you look towards the yellow boxes on the bottom of the slide, we've had a much higher response rate overall. Well, now we've got 2,330 kids that will stay all virtual, even when we move into phases 2, 3, 4, and 5. And that was a surprise for us, is that we're going to have that many families that still want their kids to learn from home. And I think that makes sense. And I think it also supports overall that we're being cautious about how we approach, in particular, phases 2 and 3. And then you also see, then, we broke out kind of the distance learning, that's the Tuesday, Friday cohort and the Monday, Thursday cohort. And that's really been coded in Skyward now. And that's helpful for schools as they plan. And then there is a small number of families, relatively small, 743, that the way we believe it's understood is that they will remain virtual until we get to phases 4 and 5, when we think it's safe enough to bring almost all of the kids back. And so some schools were even doing additional follow-up. Matt over at Hale in particular, he had 100, I think, if I recall correctly, that we're going to stay in person. He just wanted to make sure that those families truly understood that that's the intent, is that then you remain all virtual until we hit phase 5 for secondary schools. So a little bit of follow-up there. So Beth or Aaron, is there anything you want to add into this slide?
Just to underscore that we did a lot of outreach through the process, and while some of it was just to better explain, we got, as Marty talked about at the last meeting, good follow-up with having our secretaries and teachers reach out. We have now entered the method of instruction on every student's Skyward profile page. And if Marty goes to the next slide, then you'll see that actual breakdown by school. And I think I was impressed that we've balanced so well with our groups. So the distance learning Monday and Thursday, distance learning Tuesday and Friday are pretty well balanced for distance learning. And now the schools have access to this data, and they can run reports by homeroom. Teachers can actually see on their attendance which children will come on what days for distance learning. And we will be releasing for parents how to see it on Skyward as well. We'll be doing that this week. So very transparent, and parents can make a change at semester. We're trying to urge, not a constant or rapid change, but at the quarter, which the next quarter would be in January. So we feel confident that this is going to be very helpful for all of us.
So any questions about method of instruction and this information from parents? I see Noah.
You can go back one slide.
How do you do that? There we go.
Okay, so the distance learning numbers, DMT and MTF, are really combined as far as looking at the distance learning for the people who are looking at 1/3 virtual and 2/3 distance, roughly.
Correct.
With an additional, I guess I don't know what the 743% will work out to be, right. But percent-wise, but that's going to be lumped in with the virtual until we get to basically the end of these phases.
Correct.
So how does that work out when we're looking at the survey results from previously? I know we have more numbers here, but if you add everything together, is it roughly a 50-50 situation here? Or
we're a little bit
60-40?
Right. I think it's probably higher on the distance learning side, which was true compared to virtual, but those were pretty balanced in the initial. And the majority of families there wanted the 5-day in person. I think it's, before we understood more about all of this. And I think it's important to be mindful that we conducted the phone survey at a time when Wisconsin was not looking good, right? So that may influence some of the decision making here. If I put a parent hat on, it probably would have influenced mine with little ones. And so that may have had some influence here. But we've definitely shifted more to distance learning from 5-day in person. But it's a little hard to do a clear comparison because the initial survey was just open, parents could respond or not respond. with the telephone call, we got a response from almost everybody. And so it's a very different, the administration, I think, makes the results very different and maybe not apples to apples.
Okay. Was 5-day in person even an option when you called, or was it just when we move to phase 2, you want to move to distance learning, or you want to stay in virtual?
Correct. Yeah. They were all presented as we're in virtual. Here's what distance is. Here's what in person. So when we move, which are you going to be in? And that's why Matt still wanted to do a little bit of follow-up work to just make sure for his families it's clear. And I understand that from, it's a handful in an elementary school, but 100 kids, if you're off by 100 kids, that's going to be quite a surprise on a, Monday morning when they start showing up.
Right. So my understanding was when I got the survey was if I wanted 5-day in person, that means I would be in virtual until we were in 5-day or 4-day in person, right? So there's some parents in the virtual block right now in this numbers that selected 5-day or 4-day in person. Is that correct?
I mean, there could be, because there was a little bit of I think, confusion about the phases, but they're going to stay in virtual learning until we're going to be revisiting people's selection as we move through this process. But if those that do want to return for distance are able to do it, they were able to indicate that. And the people that are in person are going to remain virtual. When we get to that phase 4 and 5, we'll revisit those people, or even prior to that, as Mr. Lesser's going to do. We don't want confusion about that, but in the end, you do stay virtual until we return to phase 4 and 5. If you're waiting for that, robust option of the 4 or 5 days back in school.
Okay, so that's actually really that 743 number. It's probably the people who are like, I want to go back every day or as many days as I possibly can. So that's why they're going to be in the virtual group, but they're separated out here. So, okay, that makes sense now. Thank you.
Yep.
And I would just add one last thing is that we, with special thanks to Aaron Norris and his team, we hand looked at every sibling name and address for even homes that had siblings but with different last names. And we aligned those families. And now we have a process when our new enrollees, if you look on the next page on the next screen, you'll see at the bottom here, 3 at the very bottom. Those are 3 new enrollees that we didn't get the selection. We'll have the selection now, but this was a point in time snip of the data. So we have 3 new enrollees, and we'll have them into this these choices. We have them in there by now. So we have a good system, I think, in place.
I had one other question. It was related to the distance learning days. I was completely under the impression that we were looking at a Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, not a Monday, Thursday, Tuesday, Friday. And so did I just completely miss that, or was there a change that was made afterwards? Yeah,
so we there was a change made in our thinking along the way here. We have talked about it, but it's worth bringing up again, and because it will be a piece to communicate over and over again for parents as well. So the decision, the logic behind a Monday, Tuesday, and then a Thursday, Friday is you have Wednesday in between for cleaning, right? And so that you don't have then not kids kind of changing in the spaces. But as we work through it, Steve Eichmann and the facilities folks feel that they're going to do the same quality of cleaning every day, because Wednesday is not going to be a deeper cleaning day, because effective sanitizing needs to be done effectively the same way all the time. And so when we understood his plan, then really based on feedback from teachers that have been involved with Deidre's team that were part of the Returning to School Committee, they really thought through and asked that we would do the Monday, Thursday, Tuesday, Friday, because it's better instructionally and it's better for kids from a learning standpoint. And so we decided to really emphasize what's the better instructional approach for kids, and what teachers were worried about. If I see my cohort of kids Monday, Tuesday, then I don't see those kiddos again until the following Monday. And they just felt that just wasn't in the best interest of what we're trying to do instructionally. And so it's like, again, we've talked a lot about reasonable, thoughtful, balanced. So this was the balance, in that decision. So that's how we landed there.
In that situation, would they still be having the same teacher for the virtual days? Or would they have a different teacher for the virtual days?
They will have the same teacher for the virtual days.
Okay.
But it'll depend a little bit, especially for secondaries. Yes, that's clean. Elementaries will depend a little bit on how they've organized, and lots of elementaries are organized in pods or teams. And so there may be times when one teacher takes the virtual kids while the other teacher has the in-person kids, but they're all in the same class, because they're big teams in elementary schools that have sometimes 2, sometimes 3 teachers. And so it depends on how they've decided to organize in each elementary, but their teacher team will be the same no matter what day of the week it is.
Yeah, the goal would be to keep the consistency with the teaching staff in any humanly way possible. There's a couple of schools that went with an all virtual cohort because that happened to work out within the staffing and within the choices. And so if students are switching from their choice of distance to virtual, that student may in a couple of cases switch teachers, but that was a big part of the feedback we got from families that were on the committee and from people who spoke in open comment at the board, was that they wanted to make sure that there wasn't a lot of flip-flopping back and forth in and amongst the teachers wherever we could limit that. So we're trying really hard to honor that request.
Okay, the reason I brought it up was it was a little bit concerning from my perspective for kids getting used to going to school 2 days and then being home for 3 days versus 1 day on, 2 days off, 1 day on, 1 day off. But if the teachers are saying that this is going to be better instructionally, then I will defer to that, as I would not know. So that was why I was bringing it up. I was a little surprised when I got the survey. I was like, maybe they meant Tuesday when they said Thursday, and they just misread it. So that's why when I saw it here, I wanted to ask. So thank you for the explanation.
Good question. Okay, so then last couple slides. Is there somebody else?
Yeah.
In terms of, we've touched on some of this already. So the
I'm sorry, Marty, Heather had a question. I'm sorry. She's very soft spoken today.
Sorry, I must not have my volume all the way up. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So if we're doing the same cleaning in the buildings on Wednesdays, will staff be allowed to go into the buildings on Wednesday for those that are like teaching from within the building on the other days?
So what we're asking is teachers on Wednesdays would teach from home. And that's really a courtesy to custodial and maintenance staff. So that if they're using the ozone machines and Clorox machines, then they don't have to ask a teacher, can you leave your room? You can't come back for 2 hours. Now, where does that teacher go? So it just takes out that kind of coordination out of the mix. So they can simply kind of move through the buildings on a Wednesday like they would at night when there's nobody there. So it's really just a courtesy for the custodians and cleaners that we've asked that teachers would teach from home. The buildings will be open. Leadership teams will be in the buildings. Technology will be in the buildings. But in terms of just the general classrooms will be empty and available for cleaning.
Okay.
Cool. So
Marty, one last thing. So if the families weren't asked which days they want in terms of distance learning, just asked, do you want distance learning? And that was the choice. How was that random? Was that randomly selected then, whether or not you went into the Monday, Thursday, or the Tuesday, Friday?
It's set by the last name. A through L is Monday, Thursday. M through Z is Tuesday, Friday. And so it's based on the last name.
Okay, good, thank you.
Yeah, and then where there were conflicts or need to keep siblings together, then we went opposite last names just to create that opportunity. So one update here in where we are moving into distance learning, we're now not going to be implementing the Skyward Daily Health Screener. And instead, we're going to be asking families and employees to screen at home and report. And that is now the better practice. And so the next 3 bullets there are right off of the CDC website. So the CDC is not recommending that schools conduct the screening. And as we kind of work through the effort to try to implement a screener for every student, every staff member, the implementation kind of burden. So this is one of those, the cost benefit analysis in terms of, how we're going to spend people's time. The burden was so huge that we don't think we were going to actually, it was actually going to be helpful. And, we're hiring the health room monitors, and I use a Central or Hale as an example. I think it's reasonable to think that 100+ kids per day are not going to do the screener. Well, now we're going to have a health room monitor that's supposed to be there to help support the health room if there are kids with symptoms, or help nurses do contact tracing. Well, they're going to spend all of their 4 hours running around the building going, you didn't finish the screener, you didn't finish the screener. And so we don't think that's a good use of time. And one of the other things we're learning from area districts that are in some form of in-person instruction is the investment in contact tracing is the more important investment to make. Is that if you have an exposure or a positive test, the faster you can figure out who needs to get quarantined and get them out of the mix of everybody else, the more likely you are to be able to keep things running at some level, right? And we've talked about once we get kids back, we want to keep them back. And so we think that's really a more important investment to make. And again, I linked in this document right to the CDC guidance, and it's also the same information in the state of Wisconsin Health Services guidance to schools. And then the other piece we're working on right now is really the staffing configurations, because we're enrollment, like almost every district in the state, is way down from what we projected. So we're staffed at a higher level than what our budgets were, our projections were built around, which means there's some flexibility built in. And so we're going to be working through with each school that, at least on paper, looks like they're overstaffed right now. And, we would be making adjustments for next school year, but we're not moving teachers or taking people out. What we're doing is in a building that may be overstaffed on paper, to help them build a plan if they get a sudden quarantine, or if a teacher gets approved for a leave, that they're able to adapt to that internally without needing a substitute. Because if you're watching what's in the media, finding substitutes is ridiculously hard right now. And so we're trying to figure out internal flexibility as much as possible. We still are going to be offering short-term substitute positions, even possibly with a signing bonus, to try to attract people that we need to be able to kind of move in and out of buildings as we get to distance learning and beyond. But that's kind of the steps we're in right now, moving into the distance learning prep. And then finally, the next steps. I talked about this a little bit earlier in the presentation, that we're updating the health metrics to weight the West Allis, West Milwaukee data more in determining when to change phases. And so we've, if you think back to that earlier slide, we're counting on Milwaukee County data, the burden and positive test percentage, as well as West Allis, West Milwaukee. And the reason that we started with both is just because the number of students that come from the city of Milwaukee, so about 1,000, and we have employees that live all over Milwaukee County and in other counties. But including both of those, we think that was a reasonable place to begin. But as we go forward, we think it probably makes more sense to balance it again. There's that word again, by weighting the West Allis, West Milwaukee data more in determining when to change phases. Now, we've built an updated version of the dashboard that includes that. It's not been reviewed, and we haven't gotten feedback from the West Allis Health Department yet. So we want to make sure we're all on the same page before I introduce that. But I hope in the coming week, maybe we start talking more about that and get that up on our website. It may mean, and this is a big assumption here, that West Allis, West Milwaukee improves more quickly than the overall Milwaukee County. So we may be able to get students into phase 2 sooner than if we don't wait the West Allis, West Milwaukee data. But we also want it to be a decision point where we feel reasonably safe in moving forward, right? So we're again trying to find what's reasonable, what's thoughtful, and then what's balanced. And then in the background, this is really Beth, and we've been kind of building what's the next iteration of the website. And a lot of that is built and ready to go. It's kind of behind the scenes right now. But it really is, even the first letters are all ready to go when we announce distance learning, and I'll produce my little videos. So all of that is sitting waiting. And that's why I feel like we're in a pretty good space. It's the big last piece is really the staffing. But when we're ready to go, again, we're going to try to announce with a 2-week notice. But one of the things that as we consider, and if the health department supports kind of our direction in weighting West Allis, West Milwaukee data points more, within that 2-week window, if things suddenly take a turn for the worse, we may pause in moving into a new phase. And so that's going to be hard for teachers. It's going to be really hard for parents to adapt to those things. And that's why I'm saying it now, because we want to be, like Beth said earlier, transparent and just really upfront about where we are in our effort to work through a year like this. So that's the end of 7.1. And so I'm going to stop sharing so I can find my way back to 7.2 is the legislative update. So there's just a couple things there. So I think we're all aware that Governor Evers have placed new restrictions on indoor public gatherings. So this started on October 6th. So it's a new order limiting gatherings to 25% of a room's capacity. So that's a restriction on bars, restaurants, private businesses. And that's really because we've become one of the nation's hotspots for COVID-19 cases. And that remains in effect through November 6th. So it applies to any gathering at locations open to the public, including ticketed events. Now, schools are exempt, colleges and universities are exempt, other places are exempt. So, but what we don't know yet is what's the impact on after-school activities and athletics, right? So does that get included there? When we had the conversation last week with our health department, they were going to have the city attorney try to get some quick feedback on how this should be interpreted for us regarding after-school activities and events. And then the 1920 estimated state's support for school districts has been released. And so the good news is the state level support keeps inching up. So 64.9% in 17-18 and 65, but tiny little bit difference between 18-19 and 19-20. But it is important, we think, just to publicly recognize the level of support we get from the state for schools across our state, but then also just what's the specifics related to West Allis, West Milwaukee is included there. And then there's a pandemic school stability package that's circulating for co-sponsorship. And so some of the sponsors are listed there. It's really 2 bills addressing pupil counts. That request would be that we would be allowed to use last year's pupil count in this year, just because of the dynamics around enrollment, and in particular 4K. And it's true all over the state and for us that lots of families with 4-year-olds decided not to enroll in school at all this year. So there's some adjustments for transportation aid if the bill is supported, Fund 46 flexibility, and then suspension of student assessments and school report cards. And we have a letter on file from me that has gone to legislators, and I've gotten some good response. They're not committed either way just yet, but have definitely entered our support for this particular package, and hopefully kind of works its way through to get us some additional flexibility. And then in 7.3, the recognitions. So at Frank Lloyd Wright, they want to recognize Abby Snowpeck, the innovation coach, and Dan Amundsen, the technology lead, for all their hard work during phase 1. They've handled student, parent, and teacher issues with the highest level of expertise and customer service. At Lane, they want to recognize the school secretaries, Kim Miller and Lisa Glynn. They've handled back to school, in quotes there, issues with grace and expertise. They are welcoming and helpful to parents, students, and staff. At Franklin Elementary, and this one is really a big deal. We're so proud of Sarah Gutzwiller. She's being recognized as becoming a Juicy Juice 100% Thankful for Teachers Award. She was nominated by a parent into this competition, and after all the votes that are submitted by parents, staff, and friends, she won the contest. She'll be named one of their Teachers of the Year, and she is being awarded $10,000 for her students and her classroom. So congratulations to Sarah. We're so proud of the work you do for us. At Wilson Elementary School, I want to recognize Don Nardi at the Copy Center. Wilson had a large copy order involving multiple teachers, and all copies were delivered in an organized, timely manner. So they're saying Don is an important support for our teachers as we just distribute school in a bag to families. And then finally, we want to recognize our school board members as part of the school board, Wisconsin School Board Appreciation Week. And so thank you to the service you provide to Stephanie Emmons, to Heather Justin, Brian Keller, Kristen Kaiser, Christine Klug, Noah Lee, Gary Schultz, Jeff Sikich, and Bill Ustruck. And we just really appreciate the kind of time that it takes to put in to help our school district move forward. And it's an important part of serving the larger community. So thank you for your service. And then in 7.4, just two quick last things for me. A follow up on public comments from the September 28th meeting. There was a parent that was advocating for expanded open enrollment seats, which the board did approve at the September 28th meeting. And I'm happy to share that the student, the parent was advocating for, was the first person or the first student on the wait list in that grade level and was offered and accepted a seat. So that worked out well for that family. And then we will be starting some school clubs and after school activities. Beth worked, and Jordan Poller was a big part of that. Shelley Strasser, a big part of that, and others put together a plan that's been reviewed by the health department. There's still a couple things that we're waiting to get some feedback on inside of that plan. But this also goes to some of the survey feedback around a lack of social interaction. So we thought, okay, this is a step, again, trying to find a balance. And so to begin some of those activities, some will be in person with social distancing and masks. Many will be virtual. But to reintroduce that, again, being responsive to feedback and in alignment with what the health department says that they would support. So those are the last two things in 7.4. So that concludes the superintendent's update.
Great, thank you, Dr. Lexman. All right, we'll move on to item 8 this evening, the board president's report, taking a look at the board calendar. And let's see, so tonight, October 12th, we have a regular Board of Education meeting, and immediately following a financial stability and efficiency workshop on debt refinancing. Stick around for that one. On October 19th, starting at 6 o'clock, we have a workshop on our equity plan. On Monday, October 26th, beginning at 6 p.m., we have a regular Board of Education meeting, including our final budget and tax levy. And on Monday, November 9th at 6 p.m., we have a regular Board of Education meeting as well. I want to echo Marty's comments on celebrating School Board Week. This is a wonderful board to work with. You guys are all so professional and so dedicated to what we do. So it's a real honor to serve with all of you, especially going into my last year on the board. So that's great. So I just wanted to say thank you to all of you for what you do and how you're committed to our community as well. So do any board members have any community events to update on? Kristen?
I just, again, wanted to publicly thank Dr. Lexman, the directors, and the board for a lot of support in a personal matter, and I really appreciate you. Hopefully every Monday I'll still be here rocking it out, but I really appreciate the overwhelming support I have felt from everyone. I also want to acknowledge that because today is Indigenous Peoples Day, I work with Native Americans. I want to just acknowledge that we are teaching our students on the ancestral lands of the Kickapoo, Peoria, Potawatomi, Menominee, Miami, and Sioux. And it's really important that all of our students know where their land is, where we are from, and how we can celebrate one another.
Thanks, Kristen. All right, we will then move back on to our consent agenda this evening. Item 9, we've got 3 items on the consent agenda. Item 9.1 is the approval of minutes from the September 28th Board of Education meeting. Item 9.2, the employment summary. And item 9.3, the supplementary contracts. Does anyone need anything separated? If not, we would look for a motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any additional comments or questions? Not all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Great, that passes. Thank you, everyone. All right, we will then move on to item 10 this evening, our workshop on financial stability and efficiency on our debt refinancing. Caitlin, it's all yours.
All right, thanks. This is the exciting part of the meeting. Just kidding. Okay, so we are going to walk through our debt refinancing options that we have, opportunities to save some interest money. So this will be good for both our district and our taxpayers. So we have a special guest joining us tonight. Mr. Mike Clark is our financial advisor from Baird. So he will walk us through all the components of our debt refinancing. Before I give the floor over to Mike, I just want to give a brief overview of what we're going to be going through tonight. So basically what we find ourselves in is a low interest rate environment, which allows us the opportunity to save money in interest payments of our debt by securing a lower interest rate through a refinancing. So just like many homeowners right now are taking advantage of refinancing their mortgages, we can do a very similar thing with our debt and save some money via lower interest payments. So last month, our board finance committee met and Mike joined us there as well. We walked through a similar presentation. We do have a few updates that are in our favor since our presentation at that point. And one of which is our 1920 year-end position. So we have actually now the ability to prepay some of this debt as well. So what I'm going to do is share my screen and then Mike will walk us through our presentation tonight.
Good evening. I'll just introduce myself quickly for those who are not part of the finance committee last month. Mike Clark with Baird, been with Baird for a little over 20 years. And prior to that, I served as a business manager for school districts for a little over 11 years, lastly with the Appleton School District. So that's my background. But as Caitlin said, if you want to go to the interest rate chart, we can look at this, and I'll just spend a second on this. But interest rates are low. They have increased a little bit over the last since August. There's a couple reasons for that. I think the volume of debt issues coming to the marketplace. So the supply side is way up and the demand side is probably gone down a little bit because of the uncertainty around the election possibly, and some pushback just given the low interest rates. It's hard for people investing in bonds to commit to 20 years when you're getting 2% on average return on that money. It's just a hard thing to do. So for those two reasons, rates have crept up a little bit, but still from a historical perspective, they're very attractive. You want to go to the next slide, please? So the opportunity the district has really focuses on three issues. There are 3 state trust fund loans the district has. $1 million one that was taken out in 2013. I'm just going to change my screen size here. And then a $3 million loan that was taken out in 2016, and then a $12.8 million loan in 2017. All 3 of these loans are housed in Fund 38. The difference is the $12.8 million is an energy efficiency exemption loan. And this one's treated a little bit differently in terms of how it's levied for and who benefits from the savings. The other 2 are what we'll call traditional Fund 38 loans. And by refinancing them, it would free up dollars for elsewhere in the budget. Whereas the $12.8 million loan would result in taxpayer savings because the district gets additional levy authority with that energy efficiency exemption to levy for the payments. As the payments drop, you just use less of that authority that was granted to you. And that authority is just strictly tied to the term of the debt. As long as the debt's outstanding, you'll be getting some additional authority. Once that debt disappears, the levy authority disappears. So by refinancing, you can see the interest rates on these vary from a little, 2.75% to 3.5%. Go to the next slide, please. And so what we did is we broke it down because, again, both of them are treated differently. And again, then we'll touch on what the other option the district has in a second. But if you looked under the pinkish salmon color, that's refinancing the two smaller state trust fund loans, again, which we were called traditional Fund 38 debt. You can see that the savings below, we refinance them as one issue because it's more efficient in the marketplace. But the savings related to the two, what we'll call the traditional loans, would generate $11,000 to $16,000 of annual savings. These dollars could be used somewhere else in the budget. Under the blue heading is the savings related to the energy efficiency exemption. And this one's structured a little bit differently. Since you're gaining or the levy authority through this exemption, we thought, well, let's just go for the maximum savings. And in order to do that, what we do is we want to keep your payment close to what it was currently, because that's what the resolution kind of sets a cap. And then take all the savings in the last year. You'll see the $600,000 savings in the last year. By doing this, you're maximizing the savings to the taxpayer because you're still trying to pay back the principal as quickly as possible, and then a bigger savings in the last year of the debt. So the interest rate, we'd be looking at in this analysis, we're estimating 1.66%. Interest rates do change. We are going into the election, so there's no certainty of where rates will be, but we think the savings is definitely achievable. If you go to the next slide, this is the other option that was described that the district, and I'll let Caitlin kind of.
Uh-oh. Mike, we lost your audio.
Am I back?
Yep.
Okay. Somehow I went muted. So this is the other option, and Caitlin can describe exactly, where the funds would come from. But the district, appears to be in a situation, given the budget results of fiscal year 1920, to have the funds just to pay off those two state trust fund loans that we'll call the traditional ones, the smaller loans. So we have what those loans are, again, under the before heading, and then you look at the after, they're gone. And so the district would just take cash, pay those off. And what it would do, if you look to the right-hand side, it says hypothetical reduction in Fund 38 debt service. You'll see the $504,000 for a few years, and then $389,000 for 3 more years. That would be dollars that could be repurposed elsewhere in the budget. Again, because these are within your revenue limit. And so pretty significant savings and impact to the budget. And then the interest savings that you would have is just below that. If you follow that same column down, you'll see that essentially you'd be saving $186,000 in savings or in interest. There is, we did put in $750 for legal fees for the drafting of call notices related to the two loans, because we do have to send in a call notice to those. So that's a small expense, but that would be the only expense related to paying off those loans. And again, it would achieve pretty significant savings. And again, those dollars can be reused within the budget. Any questions on that? Or Caitlin, do you want to add anything there?
I can chime in on that. So we transferred in 1920, so as of 6/30/2020, transferred $2.3 million, which would allow us to, I know this is 2.6, so we do have a small fund balance also in Fund 38. So that would allow us to prepay the full Fund 38 debt from these two outstanding debts, these two state trust fund loans.
So it's a good opportunity. It maximizes your interest savings. It provides budget flexibility. The district had nice results. Still may be in a position to add to some fund balance, which would help from a credit rating standpoint, and then just the uncertainty of going forward with the next biennium budget. So if you go to the next slide, just kind of summarizes where we're at. And again, looking at the district's overall debt, the district has no Fund 39 debt, which is referendum approved debt, and hasn't for a few years. Last payment was on referendum approved debt was in 2018. There are other districts that are in a similar situation, but it's definitely a smaller group than the districts that have referendum approved debt outstanding. Again, the three issues we are talking about, they're callable with the 3 state trust fund loans. The district does have some other debt outstanding, but because of various reasons, not the call features or the fact that obviously the one issue is a taxable refunding relative to the call date. There's not savings to be had by looking at refinancing those at this time. So we're just focused on those 3 as I described. And again, the goals for the refinancing would just, of the 2, the 1 million or the 3 million. And again, whether you pay it off or refinance, the goal is to free up operational dollars. And again, the result of refinancing the $12.8 million state trust fund loan is taxpayer savings. As far as the existing rating, and I guess I didn't update this from the finance committee because shortly after that, the district bond rating was upgraded to a AA1 with Moody's, which is still not where the district wants them to be. We would suggest moving forward with Standard & Poor's on any refinancing. We think you're making progress financially, very significant progress in our eyes, but we just feel Moody's is going to be very deliberate in terms of moving the district up on the rating scale. We think S&P will be a fresh look. The district's existing rating still is a little problematic because it's out there in the marketplace, but we think S&P, we're confident will come in with a higher rating with S&P, and that'll put the district in a better spot in terms of taking this debt to the marketplace and saving some dollars. In terms of timeline, we didn't really change. I know there was some discussion around a special meeting, which we're in preparations. Actually, we have the rating call I think this week with S&P, so we'll be having that. The official statement is being drafted. In terms of, there was some discussion whether to sell at a special meeting. We did work with S&P to get an earlier call than what they were first willing to give us, which gives the district a little bit more flexibility. I know there's some discussion of trying to get it in before the election. You have your meeting on the 26th, which is a possibility, or if there's a willingness to maybe move off that Monday, because as I described earlier, there are a lot of bond deals in the marketplace right now, and Mondays and Tuesdays are the heaviest. So to consider maybe a meeting on Wednesday, the 28th may be helpful. And then we would close somewhere after that. And then the proceeds of these bonds, whether you do all 3 or I think most likely just the one, would pay off the bonds on January 4th, which is the earliest that you can make that payment. And again, then you'd realize the savings, whether it's the refinancing or just paying them off as a whole. So that's kind of the timeline we're on. And again, we're optimistic that the savings will be realized. And we're looking forward to the opportunity to have a conversation with Standard & Poor's, because we think the district has done some great things over the last few years. And I think they'll recognize that. And again, I think Moody's will just be very deliberate in moving you up. And I think we just need to, that's why we want to make the switch to S&P, is because we think we can make greater strides with them at this point. So with that, I'll conclude my comments and take any questions you might have.
Noah?
My question is not for Michael, it's for Caitlin. Regarding the paying off of the 2 loans, as that was not discussed previously at the Finance Committee meeting. Where exactly, those are just coming from Fund 10?
Yep. So the new information that we have essentially is just a better idea of our 1920 year-end status.
Mm-hmm.
So our audit is ongoing right now. And so we're looking at a year-end fund balances of about 24%. So that included us transferring $2.3 million from Fund 10 to Fund 38, as we've done in the past, within our 1920 budget. So even after we've done that, we're looking at a very solid fund balance. And so we'll talk more about our 1920 budget year-end status at our next budget workshop as a board. But that's the new information that's happened since our finance board committee meeting. So we were able to transfer those funds from Fund 10 to Fund 38, which we would then use those funds that are sitting in Fund 38 to prepay this debt.
So it'd be additional funds that we hadn't already looked at putting into Fund 38 to essentially, instead of paying for the payment on the debt, to completely pay off 2 of those debts.
Yep.
Correct. And then the other debts that were needed there. Okay. I just wanted clarification on where that funding was coming from.
Yep.
Thank you.
And then I just want to clarify another. We spent a significant amount of time talking about the election and the impact of the election on interest rates. And ultimately, it's an unknown factor right now. So it's beneficial for us to be able to get this approval, this interest rate approval in before the election, because it's anybody's guess what's going to happen. Even Mike doesn't know.
No. People do look back to 2016, and interest rates were fairly volatile after the election, but I do think that result was a little bit more of a surprise for the marketplace. I think there's still, uncertainty of how the election is going to go, but I don't think, but it's hard to say that it'll have the same impact in terms of creating some volatility afterwards, but you just don't know how the markets are going to react.
And so the reason why we're no longer we spent some time talking about if we needed to look at having a special meeting the week of election week, but we were able to move our S&P call rating up to this week. So we don't even have to discuss that. So what Mike mentioned was that the market is busiest on those Mondays and Tuesdays. And as our board meetings are normally on Mondays, we could do that, the sale of the refunding of those bonds on Monday, the 26th, but looking for the board's flexibility and willingness to hold a special meeting on that Wednesday, October 28th, which could potentially get us a better interest rate if we did a special meeting that day. So it would be a quick, 15-minute meeting, Max?
15, 20 minutes, yeah.
So we've done this whole presentation here, hoping to answer all the questions so that if and when we did a special meeting, it would be 15, 20 minutes.
I just want to say that when the committee did meet and talk about this, we were in favor of trying to see if we could hold a meeting on a Wednesday if we had enough board members who are willing to participate in that short meeting so that we could get a better financial footing for the district by getting hopefully a better interest rate on the debt that we'd be putting out into the marketplace based on Mike's suggestion.
Do we need to move that, or can we just do it? Have the meeting?
The only thing the district would need to do is just schedule and post it as a special meeting. And then we'll have the rating in time for the meeting on the 28th or the 26th. Again,
my question is more like, do we have to move it?
No, it would be in addition to. Yeah, we would have a meeting on the 26th, a traditional meeting that's scheduled. And if we needed to have a separate meeting on the 28th, we would have to notice and host a separate meeting on the 28th just to vote on the rate and the refinance.
So we could move that at the 26th meeting or the 28th. We don't need to move it now.
It's not on the agenda right now for anything, so we would just have to wait. We would know at that
Right.
point, yeah.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Kristen.
I just want to make sure I understand because I'm still new to all the budget stuff. Does this affect our upcoming budget vote or any way? Does this affect taxpayers in any way?
Yes. So there are kind of both, because the $12.8 million debt, that one is energy efficiency debt, which means that one is entirely affecting the taxpayers. So if we do get a lower interest rate, that essentially brings down the amount that our taxpayers pay. The other two would affect our budget. So that is within the revenue limit, as we say. So ultimately, any payments that we have for Fund 38 debt reduces the amount that we have in our Fund 10, which is our general school operating budget. So either way, if we lowered the interest rate, therefore we would have a lower interest payment. That would free up small amount of Fund 10 dollars. If we paid off, that would free up more additional Fund 10 dollars. Good question. Any other questions?
Caitlin, how will you continue to communicate this to us so that we know what's going on in anticipation between, because next Monday is a workshop, and then we've got the meeting scheduled for the 26th. So how far will we know, or in advance will we know whether or not we'll need to notice a separate meeting, or whether or not we'll be able to complete this on the 26th?
So I guess if the preferred route is to go on that Wednesday, because that will give us a better chance of a lower interest rate. So maybe we have some feedback here tonight about how many of our board members would be willing to have a meeting on that Wednesday, the 28th? Okay.
I'm free.
Okay. Counting my squares. I think that's about 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or 6 of you that I'm seeing. So that should, we just need, I think, our majority, 5.
Yep.
I think you've got 7.
Okay. So looks like we'll move forward with doing that 28th meeting, and then we'll make sure we notice it and do all the right things that Stephanie can help us with.
This is Mike, and as we get closer, as we get through the rating process, as we see how interest rates are moving, we'll keep the district updated in terms of where we feel the savings is. There is always the possibility rates move kind of against us in the next couple of weeks, just even leading into the election. The district has the flexibility to delay the sale and do it in November or December. So there, we're not gonna force it. We're not gonna, just because we have a meeting, do it on a day that's not in the best interest of the district. So I just want to make sure you're aware of that. And so we'll be in constant communication with the district over the next couple of weeks as we move closer to that date. And if for some reason it's just not going to work out for the 28th, we'll communicate the reasons why and suggestions of possibly when to move the meeting to a later date. So.
Cool. Thank you so much, Mike, for joining us.
All right. Have a good evening.
All right, any other questions for Caitlin? Jeff?
Not really a question, more of a comment. Wanted to thank Caitlin and really wanted to thank Dr. Lexman, because I go back on this board to when we were listing and kind of like sinking, and through his leadership, I never thought I'd be sitting in a meeting like this where we're going to be looking in the positive. So thank you, Dr. Lexman.
Any other comments or questions that we finance? All right, that's the end, and we'll just need a motion to adjourn.
So
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. A wonderful night, everybody. Stay safe.